Hello and welcome to the Palmer Performance YouTube channel. This week we're back on the GSXR750 track bike project and it's time to take the suspension out, go and visit our friend Darren at MCT Suspension and have a look and see what we can do with the standard items to improve them for track use. Stay tuned. Here's the wee beastie back on the mat, all mapped up and ready to go. We had that FI light on, if you remember before, which was from me not putting a bypass plug in for the AIS, and we couldn't turn it off on the Woolwich flash, but it's all good now. The just need a little bypass plug which I got off eBay, which was easy enough, which plugs in under there. But anyway, rear shock's got to come out. We haven't actually had the shock out of this yet, but it's pretty much the same as any other bike. There's a top mount up there which we can get to either side of the subframe. Slightly more tricky one is the lower mount, which is sort of there. It's obscured a bit by the dog bone part of the linkage. So what we will probably have to do is undo the bolt at the back of the linkage, swing the dog bone out of the way, and then undo the bottom one and then see which way it's going to come out. Probably have to take the rear wheel out so that we can drop the swing arm down low enough. Might then end up having to take the silencer off to move it down, so sometimes it can be a bit of a faff. Obviously we'll get the bike supported on some peg stands, and then the front end we've taken out before, so that'll just be a case of getting the under yoke paddock stand on it. Calipers off, mudguard off, wheel out, and then just drop them through and put them in the van and take a little jolly over to MCT. Right, let's get cracking. And here we go. Let's get the exhaust silencer out of the way so we can access the bolts for the suspension linkage. We'll get the rear wheel out. Gives us that little bit more access. And now we're just undoing the top mount of the shock. Get the peg stands under, drop the rear stand out. Now we can access the lower shock bolts. Now, these were really sort of a little bit stuck in, so you can see I'm just tapping the bolts out there. There was a bit of corrosion on the bolts. They obviously haven't been removed for some time. Just trying to get the bottom shock bolt undone there. And then we're going to try and squeeze it out the top. There we go. Back on the front end. Calipers off. Front wheel out. Mudguard off. And with that out of the way, we can now drop the forks out. Now, big thing when you take the forks out is not to twist them, just try and pull them straight out, otherwise it's quite easy to mark the stanchions. And now we can take a trip to go and see Darren.
Do that.
So I've just arrived at MCT Suspension to pick up the GSXR forks and shock, two chairs set up, cups of tea and cake. Now, I'd like to think every customer that comes to MCT gets treated like this, but they don't, so unlucky.
Fairness, the cakes were brought by custom.
Okay, we'll let you off then. Right, let's have a look at what you've done for me anyway.
Right, okay.
So that's the rear shock out of the GSXR.
Rear shock, serviced it, revalved it. The main issue with these shocks is the rebound adjuster. The needle has a very, very small orifice. So what we do on these, we modify the piston, get a bit more bleed, revalve it, put the spring on, set it all up to the customer's weight use and stuff. This guy's track days, 86 kilo, ex-racer, so pretty capable. This shock will be mega. They'll absolutely love it. It's got high and low speed compression, rebound. So it's got new bush, new seals, revalve, spring, oil, gas. Pretty much all of it's been breakdone.
Yeah, and normally what you do is you have your little setup book, don't you? And that'll have the base settings in it from your experience, and then recommendations of how to set the sag.
Yeah, that's with the forks over here.
There, Darren's little book with the settings, and then it'll have a sag measurement in there.
For racers and that sort of stuff, that might come with dry and wet settings. For road users, that might come with solo, pillion, luggage settings, that sort of stuff. So
cool.
Different stuff.
And then the forks.
Front forks, MCT 20mm piston kit, fully serviced, new bushing, new seals, new scraper seals. Nothing really wrong with compression adjusters. Again, nothing really wrong with the rebound adjusters. So you've just got a piston kit there with springs, oil, set up. We modified the bump pistons because it's not being used on the road. We don't remove them, just change how they work, slightly less aggressive. So that together with the decent springs in there, be all he needs.
Yeah, and roughly like the cost of that fork, the fork kit and the shock kit all together was...
Yeah, so the forks are £395 plus VAT. A breakdown on the shock is £120 for the service, between 50 and 75 for a revalve, 82 for a spring. So you're talking around 225 quid, something like that, for a rear shock.
Yeah, so it's about 700 quid for the front and back end, give or take. And you got something which is, you know, pretty blooming good for the... it's not... Yeah.
It's set up for the individual. So like with any high-end product, which is, even with Olin, something like that, if you buy it, it's still generic. So you've still got to spring it. You might have to revalve it, things like that. So this is a kit that's tailor-built to the guy.
And if I remember right, didn't you used to have a 750?
Yeah, I've had pretty much all of them.
Yeah. So you spent a lot of time messing around with yourself. I mean, Darren's got his own R1 that he bought in 2015 when they came out, and he's forever, for want of a better word, dicking around with that and different suspension and
the most pulled apart R1 ever.
So yeah, aside as well as motocross stuff, Darren's son Seth races motocross as well, so he's forever dicking around with motocross suspension as well. And you got what, a little 660 in?
Yeah, a little 660 in. Like we were just broaching on, this has got the latest K-Tech stuff in, but it's not right. You know, it wasn't for this customer.
Yeah.
So the spring rates are wrong. I think we've got a little bit of issue with air in the rear shock. So we'll go through it. The shock shouldn't need a service, but it will need re-oiling, regassing, and then springs in the front, spring in the rear. Set it all up, should be much more suited to the guy's needs.
Cool, lovely old job. Right, let's sit down and have our cup of tea now.
Good boy.
Cheers, mate. And back to the workshop with the suspension all freshly rebuilt and modified. We can get the front end all built back up again. Getting the forks in, nipping them up, and then torquing them up to the factory specs. Same with the handlebars and the top yoke. Quick wipe of the bottoms. Front wheel back in, not before we put the mudguard on though. Quite a lot of bikes you can't put the mudguard on unless the wheel's out, so. You can see I just lowered the front stand there just to make sure the forks were centralised on the axle. And now we've just got some slightly different brake pads that we've got to put in the bike, which are a bit more suited to track. TRW SCR compound. So we're just pushing the old pads back to get the pistons back. We've taken the reservoir cap off whilst we do that. Put the new pads in. Obviously the calipers are clean from when we cleaned them a couple of episodes ago. Get those new pads in. Torque up all the pinch bolts. Torque up all the pad retaining bolts. Torque up the brake pads themselves. And then we're just having to take a little bit of fluid out of the reservoir, which we're doing with a clean piece of tissue. Right, front end's in. Now we'll get the shock in, but before we do that, we need to clean up these bolts. You see they've got a bit dry, a bit of corrosion on there. So what I'm going to do with them is literally just give them a wash, scrub them up with a bit of Scotch-Brite. If they're really bad, I'd throw them in my lathe, spin them up. You could put them in a battery drill, do the same thing, spin it up, clean it all up, get all the dryness and corrosion off, and then throw some grease on them before putting them back in. Right, let's get this rear shock in. And now onto the rear shock. We've got some Butylene racing grease for the suspension linkage bolts, make sure they don't get seized in again. And we're just wiggling it all around, getting all the bolts in place. Top mount done up, bottom mount done up. It is a bit fiddly, this one. Access isn't great, especially with the way the full Yoshi exhaust system sort of serpents around beneath the shock linkage. A bit more grease on that bolt, get that one in. And then we can get it back on the main stand, torque the bolts up, little push up and down, make sure it all feels good. Rear wheel back in, peg stands out. And all we've got to do now is just drop the silencer back on. Good to go. There we go, suspension all in, exhaust back on. That red spring and a nice clean shock. Looks a bit nicer. Lovely old MCT stickers on there. We just got to check the sags on it. which is easy enough done, but should be good to go. Right, next thing. Now, we decided we want to put a quick shifter on the bike, and because John at Track Electronics flashed the bike with Woolwich software, what we've actually decided is we're going to put the race options kit on. So that gives us the quick shifter all run through the ECU, so that you don't have any sort of extra auxiliary wiring sort of cluttering things up under there on top of the coils, because we have, you know, it can be a reliability thing. Some of these aftermarket quick shifters that plug into the tops of the coils, if the wiring's not routed nicely, it can short out and cause issues and misfires. If it's run through the ECU, then it keeps everything neater and ECU controlled. Now, with the race options, what we also get is the option to have a pit limiter. So we've kept the theme of budget and got one of these nice little race switches off eBay. It's a Chinese special, and it was like 10 quid. It's actually got 3 buttons on it, but we're only going to use 2. So on the off chance the bike's going to get raced, we're going to use that switch to operate a Rainlight, and then that's a latching switch, obviously on and off, and then this momentary switch down here we'll use for the pit limiter. So basically, as you're rolling down pit lane, you just hold your thumb on that and you get the and look really cool to all your mates on a track day. Obviously, we've got to wire that in. That will require some wiring going back towards the ECU sort of neck of the woods. Normally, that sort of thing plugs into like the exhaust servo wiring. The Rainlight, now this is one that's worth listening to if you are building a race/track bike. Now, what I'll do on most bikes that are still running a standard wiring loom is I'll actually wire the Rainlight into the front brake light switch wiring. So that is the original front brake light switch connectors there. Now, the idea there is that if we plug our switch into that, so when the switch is in, it's effectively turning the brake light on, then we don't need to do any other wiring. We literally just need to find out in this connector back here, which is the earth and which is the brake light positive power feed, and connect our Rainlight up to that. And then we're making use of the original wiring that's in the bike. It's a fused circuit, so if for any reason anything shorts out, the fuse is going to blow. So from that point of view, from a safety point of view, that's all good. And it just makes the job a whole load easier. You're not going to run some nasty wires back and forth up there. Now, the only thing worth pointing out about that is some really modern bikes can get upset if, well, from the electronics point of view, if it thinks you've got the front brake on. No such worries with this old girl. She's old enough that all the sort of brake system was completely separate from the ECU, but just worth bearing that in mind if you are fitting a Rainlight. So there we go, guys. Switch is all wired in. Wire run up to the back for John to wire in the pit limit switch. Rainlight plugged in, connector sorted. We'll worry about where to mount that when we get the bodywork on, whether that goes, leave a mount on the bodywork, or we'll screw it direct to the under tray. Just depends how the seat unit is, really. Obviously, the other bonus of wiring the switch to the original brake light circuit is it means that when you turn the ignition off, the light will also go off. So let's just turn the bike on. If I press, obviously it's off at the moment, press the button, now it's on. If I turn the key off, the light turns off with it. And obviously if you just wired it in direct to the battery, it means you have to remember to turn the Rainlight switch off when you come in. I've seen people flatten batteries because they've forgotten to turn them off. So that is another handy thing about doing it that way. But I think that is about it for this video. Thanks for watching. Next video for this bike will more than likely be fitting fairings, and then it's pretty much done and ready to go. So we'll have to take it to a track somewhere, I guess. As always, please like and subscribe, check out all our other videos, and we'll see you soon.